Joining us on this is our longtime friend Dinesh D'Souza, who's been talking quite a bit about this. As you know, he's a best-selling author, he's a filmmaker, and he is also the host of the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast, and he joins us now via Skype. Good to see you, Dinesh. How are you?
Dana, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. This really is, this happened all like incredibly quickly. And we've been talking about this on Breaking on the show as well. Just in the past 10 years, we've gone from sensitivity to full on wokery. I was playing a little bit earlier some of the sound bites from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was trying to criticize Tom Cotton and Dan Crenshaw for daring to take him to task for trying to incorporate critical race theory as some form of military readiness training. And it's really kind of remarkable how far all of this has integrated itself in every aspect of American life, whether it is sports, whether it's education, entertainment, film, what have you. I want to talk a little bit about this because, you've been on the forefront of this. I know you have a new documentary that's coming out about this. But to kind of sum it up, Joe Biden yesterday talking about two-way stuff. Nancy Pelosi today announcing this commission on January 6th. Two different competing narratives. I'm just kind of stunned and almost speechless by everything, especially the announcement of this today. I wanted to get your thoughts, and I want to talk about the documentary that you have coming out too, as well, that you're working on. What is happening in America? Because free thought doesn't exist anymore, and this really is a Marxist revolution within the culture.
Yes, the essence of Marx was always to shut down a rival narrative. The reason Marx thought it was okay to do that is he believed that he was advancing a scientific law of history. So Marx said, I'm not a prophet. I'm not predicting something in the kind of Old Testament sense. I'm describing the way science works, kind of like a laboratory experiment. So every rival theory is completely wrong. Only mine is correct. And you can see how it's a short step to then say, well, listen, everybody else is putting out misinformation. And then we, the Marxists, are the only ones putting out information. Critical race theory builds on something called critical theory, which is an old Marxist idea. And so they've imported the same intolerance of Marxism. By the way, intolerance you see in every Marxist country from Cuba to Venezuela. They've imported it ideologically into critical race theory. So, here's Mark Milley, and, he's talking about the need to have open-minded understanding, to foster debate. These are empty cliches because critical race theory isn't about any of that. None of the critical race theorists will debate me. They'll never have me on their shows. They'll never invite me to their campuses. They don't want to debate. They want to shut people down, deplatform them, get them fired. This is their mode of operation. Yeah. The other thing is when Milley talks about, the one specific incident he refers to, it's very obvious he doesn't understand at all. He thinks that January 6th was produced by white rage. You go, I'm going to try to understand this white rage. I'm white, but I don't have the white rage. I mean, you're listening to a guy with medals, but he sounds like a complete idiot. They're there to overthrow the Constitution. Have you talked to any one of them? Don't you realize they were there to get an authentic counting of the vote? Can you be so obtuse as to think that they're there to overthrow the Constitution? So you got these guys and they look sober and they got a lot of medals, but you actually critically listen to what comes out of their mouth. They're babbling idiots.
I'm really talking with Dinesh D'Souza. I'm really uncomfortable with the idea of the left putting up. I mean, remember when Trump happened to exit the White House and walk over to St. John's Church after rioters tried to burn it down, and just happened to be, according to the statement from those military officials, they were leaving a separate meeting and exiting at the same time he was, and they happened to walk out together. And then, of course, everyone was accusing Trump of staging this photo op with military officials. But here you have Democrats actually using military officials to try to beat back genuine, honest criticism and questioning of using CRT as military training. That makes me really, really, really uncomfortable, Dinesh.
Yeah, the really telling moment was when one of the congresswomen asked the defense secretary about how do you define extremism? What is your definition? See, this is a trap for them, because if they say what that definition is, it's going to be much more applicable to Antifa and Black Lives Matter than it is to any Trump supporter. So they have to be very cagey about it and pretend like, oh no, we're not talking about people fighting for social justice, even if they're setting the church on fire, storming the courthouse. Somehow that is not extremism. We're not going to be rooting out people who are going into the military who have those views. But if someone is like hyper patriotic, believes the country is endangered, believe our institutions can't be trusted, basically what you and I believe, then, oh no, you're an extremist, now. So the question is, who gets to set the meter here? Who gets to define what the center is? I mean, you've got two closely matched political parties, and this whole idea that one party gets to define its opposition as inherently extremist, I mean, that's the real danger to democracy.
Absolutely. And we've seen repercussions from this. We're talking to Dinesh D'Souza, host of the Dinesh D'Souza podcast. With Fauci, for instance, the masks, and now reading his emails, seeing that he was telling the American public one thing, while privately he was having conversations with colleagues saying, well, these masks actually don't do anything. Really N95s do, but nothing else does. We find all of this double speak, but yet there were people who went to jail for not wearing masks. There were people who were fined for opening their businesses. If you ask questions about the science on which all of these rules and apparently now laws are based on, you're deplatformed from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram, from wherever. There are now, we can actually measure real consequences of livelihoods being destroyed, monetary losses for not acquiescing to this speech police, whether it is questioning the government, CRT, or something else. I'm not sure, quite frankly, how to push back on this, but I feel like there's a developing consensus, Dinesh, with maybe some of the people who find that they aren't as far on the left as they thought. What do you think of that?
I do think there is a centrist faction that is an intellectual faction that's breaking away from the left on this. They may not be breaking from the Democratic Party, but they are breaking from the ideological intolerant left. I mean, I think for a guy like Andrew Sullivan, for example, a guy who's been by and large left-leaning, I don't think he can really believe when he sees the ACLU talking about the fact, they're really excited about banning a book. This is the ACLU. So I think, Andrew realizes something's gone terribly wrong here. I also think American voters are waking up. They realize that these people are pushing a very radical agenda, and it's very dangerous. And I think a third possibility, which goes even further than what you're talking about, is this. It is now quite possible, maybe even plausible, that the FBI was part of the group that orchestrated January 6th, which is to say they fomented it. And there's now a track record of the FBI doing this going all the way back to the use of the Patriot Act, where they'd find some poor Muslim guy who's like 19 years old living with his mom, and they tell him, hey, how about if you blow up this? How about if you blow up that? We'll give you the bombs. We'll give you the materials. So you're taking guys who would not do something on their own. You're radicalizing them. You're making them do something, and then you go, busted. Congrats to the FBI. So you see this sort of, the FBI is pulling a Jussie Smollett operation here, and then they turn around and they blame, white supremacists did this, Trump instigated it, when it may well turn out that they did.
That's a great point. And for those who might, I can already imagine, leftist wokery sites, Media Matters, Dinesh D'Souza saying the FBI, that the thing is, though, this is speculation that's coming from a lot of people, and even people that have been kind of center left. I mean, when you talk about the historical involvement in the FBI in some of these things, and when you look at just like what happened after 2016, the FBI's involvement in circumventing the proper lawful procedure for a FISA court to get surveillance and wiretapping. I mean, is it really beyond the realm of possibility to think that something like this could happen? Especially, Dinesh, when you see the reaction of people like Nancy Pelosi and Democrats today. They announced this commission to investigate what's going on. I mean, these were unarmed people, and I say this facetiously. They looked like, Burning Man rejects who went in unarmed to the Capitol. If there were people who did damage and were involved in assaults, fine, arrest them. No one's objecting to that. But the idea of calling this an insurrection when for an entire summer and longer you had the left that with their bonds being promoted by the Vice President of the United States attacking federal courthouses, burning down entire city blocks in Kentucky and in Minnesota, etc. That's not an insurrection. It seems, Dinesh, like they're using this as the precursor to go and prosecute wrongthink and then try to establish, well, everything is because of white supremacy, even within military, and use that as the basis for going after any kind of challenge to opinion. That is terrifying, and I think we're like there.
They don't even, these Biden guys, they don't even think through what they themselves say. So recently, Biden, in the gun context, he comes up and he says, and I think he's trying to be kind of jovial about it. He goes, hey, listen, if you want to overthrow the U.S. government, don't just come with guns. Don't even come with, ARs. You need some F-15s. You need some nukes. Okay, I agree. Now, here's my question.
I would like one, yes.
On January 6th, you have unarmed protesters, a couple of hundred of them, who kind of college occupation style push their way into what apparently is a barely guarded Capitol. They walk around, they shout a lot, they wave some flags and slogans. They didn't have any. They didn't have any F-15s. They didn't have any nuclear bombs, and yet you're saying they were overthrowing the U.S. government. So get your story straight, you morons. Because on the one hand, you're claiming that in order to seriously threaten the government, you need massive military power. Then you're calling a bunch of unarmed guys grandmothers, people who basically taking selfies while cops are milling around. Somehow you want to portray them as the American version of Al Qaeda or the American version of the Oklahoma City bombers. It just defies logic, but they're pressing this narrative, as you say. They're trying to milk it. They're trying to make it work. They tried the sick Nick lie. That didn't work. So now they're scrounging. They're trying to find something to make this halfway believable when it's not believable at all.
All right. Last question for you. Dinesh D'Souza, who has the Dinesh D'Souza podcast and a new documentary coming out that's in the works. That part of that Joe Biden quote, when he was citing Thomas Jefferson there, he left out the tyrant part. What do you think that is?
Yeah, with Biden, I don't know what to make of this guy. I mean, to me, I go between, sometimes I think he reflects the nincompoopery of Carter. At other times, I think he reflects the malevolence of Obama. I think he's actually a combination of both. He's incompetent and bumbling at times. At other times, he's malevolent. He kind of alternates. He combines the two worst strains of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, he tries to be good cop and bad cop in one person. And it ends up being incredibly confusing for everybody. Dinesh D'Souza, always a pleasure to talk with you. Oh, one last quick, I lied. That was not my last. One last quick question. Your documentary, all about free speech and free thought, etc. I know that's it was just announced, but do you have an ETA? What can you tell us?
Well, it's just in the early stages. I'm partnering with Salem, the media corporation. They also sponsor my podcast. So we're working together to get this started. So I'm in the very early stages. I'm not even sure what the documentary will be titled when it finally comes out. We're looking to bring it out next summer. So we're basically a year away. In the meantime, I'm having real fun doing the daily podcast because, I've done the books and the movies and speeches, but those are all kind of episodic. So the idea of being in the daily flow of events, and I'm doing this audio and video, it's a little bit of a new twist for me, but I'm really enjoying it.
Well, and I'm glad you are, because you were made for it. It's always good to talk with you. I always look forward to seeing what you have next. It's always you always do such great work. Dinesh D'Souza, always good to see you, Dinesh. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.